Welcome to Brilliant Minds Unlocked. Today we are peering through the lens of history at a really extraordinary figure. A man whose life story, well, it pretty much captures the entire arc of artificial intelligence. From this, ridiculed theory all the way to a potentially terrifying reality. I want you to picture this for a second. It's the 1970s, maybe the 80s. There's a young man, Geoffrey Hinton, working basically alone in some dimly lit lab. He's completely dedicated to this one single, audacious idea. The idea that machines could learn, that they could reason based on patterns, inspired by the human brain. And at the time, everyone else, every established authority called it a fantasy, a total dead end. But he persisted. So today we're deep diving into the journey of the godfather of AI, a man who not only gave us the foundational tools for modern AI, but then, much later, did something unbelievable. In 2023, he left his very comfortable job at Google to sound the alarm, to warn the world about the danger of his own creation. It's just this profound moral paradox.
It really is, and that's the core tension we need to unpack for you. Our sources frame this so perfectly. This isn't just a history of algorithms. No, it's the eternal struggle between creation and control, between the incredible speed of progress and the much slower march of human morality. Our mission here is to extract those crucial nuggets, to really understand not just the technical breakthrough, but the moral reckoning that came right after it.
Okay, let's start at the beginning then.
Yeah.
Because to get the whole story, you have to understand why Hinton was rejected so forcefully in the first place. He believed in these things called neural networks. But back in the 80s, the field of AI was, it was dominated by a totally different philosophy.
Yeah.
What was that intellectual battlefield like?
Oh, it was a battle, for sure. And Hinton was definitely on the losing side. The prevailing philosophy was what we now call symbolic AI, or, good old-fashioned AI. These researchers, they believed intelligence was all about defining explicit rules. If X happens, then do Y. It was like coding a massive, incredibly intricate decision tree. They wanted logic, symbols, rigid programming.
And Hinton's whole approach, connectionism, was the absolute opposite of that.
Precisely. Hinton's neural networks, which are basically systems that learn by finding patterns in data, they were just seen as mathematically messy, too complex, and honestly a bit too biologically fuzzy for serious computer science.
So they just laughed at him.
They did. Sources from that period show his work being openly ridiculed. They literally called his ideas, which were inspired by the brain, fanciful, even absurd, a scientific dead end.
And the key tool he was championing at the time was the backpropagation algorithm, which is what lets a network learn from its mistakes. So why did the symbolic AI community find that idea so objectionable? And what happened because they rejected it?
Well, there were two big problems for them. First, backpropagation needs an immense amount of computational power.
Which they just didn't have yet.
Exactly, it didn't exist. And second, it was kind of a black box. It was really hard to interpret why the AI made a certain decision. It lacked that clear, logical chain they demanded.
And that skepticism led to the AI winter.
Yeah, it did, directly. Funding just vanished. Not just for Hinton, but for the entire concept of neural networks. Major conferences were actively ignoring papers on the subject. If you worked in that area, your career was basically stalled.
Can you just imagine that pressure?
Yeah.
Seeing the future so clearly, knowing you have this tool that could unlock true machine learning while the entire scientific world just dismisses you? It wasn't just skepticism, it was active career-limiting indifference.
It must have been crushing. But what's really clear is that Hinton's persistence, it came from this deeper conviction. He felt the symbolic approach, the rule-based AI, it would never achieve general intelligence. It could only solve problems it was explicitly programmed for.
So he was chasing something bigger?
Much bigger. He was chasing a vision of intelligence that could generalize, that could reason, a vision not just reserved for, flesh and neurons. And that belief is what kept him going, even when his papers were rejected year after year after year.
Okay, so here's where this story takes a really pivotal turn. Hinton is facing all this hostility, the funding is dried up in the US, and he makes a huge decision. He leaves the United States. Which is kind of ironic, right? The future of computing had to flee the established powerhouses to survive.
Yeah.
So where did he go?
He went to Canada. He found refuge at the University of Toronto. And the sources all suggest he was really looking for an environment where ideas could, quote, breathe freely.
Yeah.
Which basically meant a place that was less constrained by that symbolic AI dogma and the funding drought. He wasn't looking for fame, he was just looking for a quiet place to work.
And that location becomes absolutely critical to the story, doesn't it? Because for almost 20 years, the most important work on neural nets was happening in the shadows, up in Canada.
It was. It was a period of slow, isolated, very technical work. It was Hinton and just a handful of dedicated grad students keeping that flame alive. They worked on really foundational concepts like Boltzmann machines, just trying to figure out how to stack these neural layers deep enough to solve complex problems. That was the big hurdle.
So he saw every failure not as a dead end, but as a clue.
That's a great way to put it. The sources describe him viewing each failed experiment as a whisper from the universe saying, try again, you're close, but not quite there. It was a long, long period of just listening and iterating.
It's just amazing how often that revolutionary progress happens so far from the spotlight.
Yeah.
Away from all the hype. They were just guided by this conviction that deep learning, as we now call it, was actually possible.
Exactly. And that lack of external pressure, it probably helped. It allowed them to experiment freely without having to publish flashy results every 6 months. They were building the theoretical groundwork knowing the hardware would eventually catch up. The whole modern AI industry is basically repaying the intellectual debt from that quiet period.
So let's fast forward. We jump ahead to 2012, still in Toronto. Decades of that quiet persistence are about to boil over into global recognition. What was the specific breakthrough? What was the event that changed everything?
It was a competition, the ImageNet Large-Scale Visual Recognition Challenge, a huge deal in the computer vision world. The task was to classify millions of images into 1,000 different categories. Hinton and 2 of his students, Alex Krzyzewski and Ilya Sutskever, submitted their deep neural network. They called it AlexNet.
And what was the outcome? Just how big of a deal was this?
Oh, the shift was seismic. I mean, previous winners were using traditional methods, and their error rate was around, say, 25%. AlexNet came in with an error rate of just 15.3%.
Why?
So this wasn't a small step. This was a giant leap. It was like, for the first time, a machine could truly see the world. It could identify objects with an accuracy that was just demonstrably better than every other method out there. The theory was suddenly a startling, measurable reality.
I remember reading about that. It wasn't just that they won, it was that they absolutely crushed the competition. It was like lighting a match in a dark room and revealing this entirely new kind of digital mind. The whole field that had mocked him for decades had to, reverse course overnight.
And the practical consequences came almost immediately. I mean, Google, Facebook, Microsoft, every major tech company realized they had totally missed the revolution. The sources say that within months, Google was knocking on his door. And the formerly rejected researcher, the guy whose ideas were once called absurd, was suddenly the globally celebrated godfather of AI.
It's the ultimate validation.
The ultimate, albeit very delayed, validation.
Okay, so we have this incredible story of persistence paying off. But now the story shifts. It turns from triumph to something much more like profound moral reflection. As these AI models just exploded in capability, writing code, painting, deepfakes, his excitement, it started to turn into real concern.
It's the classic creator's paradox, isn't it? He had to confront the reality that he'd helped open a door that might lead to disaster. He saw the speed of these systems accelerating, especially after 2017, and realized that, power without wisdom can very quickly become danger.
And the question became personal for him.
Deeply personal. He had to ask himself, was I a hero for revealing this potential, or did I just open Pandora's box?
When you look at his warnings, they aren't just vague anxieties. What were the specific dangers that drove him to publicly break with his own life's work?
There were 3 core dangers he kept returning to. The first was misinformation, the erosion of truth. He warned that these models would get incredibly good at creating convincing deepfakes and mass disinformation, at a scale that could destabilize democracy.
Which we're already seeing the beginnings of.
We are. The second was massive job displacement. Not just blue-collar factory jobs, but cognitive, white-collar jobs. The automation of thinking tasks that millions of people depend on.
And the third one, the darkest one.
The third concern, and the one he often seemed most afraid of, was military applications. Autonomous weapons. He was terrified that the same general intelligence he helped create could be turned into autonomous killing machines or sophisticated cyber weapons that operate completely outside of human control. He felt development was just far outpacing regulation.
So that brings us to the critical turning point in 2023. He's at the top of his field, celebrated, comfortable at Google. Why leave?
It was a very deliberate, ethical statement. He knew that as long as he was a Google employee, any critique he made would be seen through that corporate lens. By stepping away, he freed himself. He could speak openly, not about how to make the algorithms better, but about responsibility.
He wanted to change the conversation.
He wanted to force the world to slow down, to seriously consider the ethical shadow that was being cast by his own brilliance. He essentially chose the role of a global conscience over corporate comfort.
Imagine making that choice. Decades of your life's work finally celebrated, and you step away because you fear what humanity will do with it. It really raises that universal question. What does it mean when the teacher begins to fear the student?
And Hinton's core message now, if you distill it all down, is a plea for humility. He's urging us to shift our focus from how we build faster machines to why humans think, and why our capacity for compassion and foresight is what really defines intelligence.
So empathy over efficiency.
Exactly. Empathy over efficiency and understanding over simple automation. He says the answer to whether AI serves us or replaces us doesn't lie in the code. It lies in us, in our capacity for reflection, for compassion, and for restraint.
And that really is the universal lesson here, isn't it? It transcends the technology. Hinton's life, the first part of it, proves that belief and persistence can, well, they can bend reality. That's the stories that break through.
For sure. And his warning, the second part of his story, is one of profound humility. It teaches us that brilliance can destroy us if we forget the heart behind the mind. He spent decades proving machines could learn, and now he's spending his final years trying to prove that humans still need to lead.
So this fascinating reversal, what does it ultimately tell us about the nature of progress itself?
Well, I think the final thought here is a powerful one. The machines may be learning to think, but we as their creators must never forget to feel and to question. The story of Geoffrey Hinton, when you strip away the silicon and the billions of dollars, it isn't really about machines at all. It's about a human being who refused to stop dreaming and then had the moral courage to warn the world about the dream's potential nightmare.
And the final takeaway, pulled straight from the source material, is this. If Geoffrey Hinton taught the world anything, it is this. Progress means nothing without purpose. Boom. And, I would add, without a deep sense of ethical responsibility, we now know the story of the man who dared to create artificial intelligence and then dared to question it. So if we apply this lesson, what if the real intelligence we need to cultivate isn't artificial at all? What if it's the human courage to constantly critically question the things we create? That's something for you to think about.